So where we left off our last video is we have this kind of situation here where I have my buttons. I have some window that I'm going to have my game occurring in. If I press my button, I can add a line or remove a line. But what I want to do now is I'm going to add a little box here in the corner, or a little representation in the corner, and that's going to kind of keep track as my game goes. So to do this, I'm going to have to create a timer object. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create another action listener. I can make as many action listeners as I want, provided that they have different names. So just like before, we're going to declare and construct the object. We're going to get an error because an action listener is an interface, and as such, it's a little different than a class. But what we want to know right now for an interface, if we come across one, is that we have to implement all of the methods associated, so we have to override them all. So the action listener has one method associated with it, which is action performed, so I have to override that. That works fine now. So we've now overridden that. Now what I'm going to do is, for now I'm just going to do this. I'm just going to put in on their system.print. So another useful thing you can do with an action listener is you can actually associate it with a timer. Now timer objects are great for doing some things. They are plagued with some challenges, so they're not always the best approach when you want a timed event, or when you want to, let me rephrase that. They're not always the best approach when you want to have multiple events running at the same time. Sometimes students and people will use timers, but just be aware that they're not ideal, but they're really good for learning some essentials and to doing some interesting things in your program. So we're going to create this timer object called timer T1. And actually, I'm not going to do it here. I'm going to come up here and do it inside here so I can access it anywhere. So I'm going to come up here, private timer T1. Okay, and then it's going to ask me to import it. And when I import it, you'll notice there's a number of different timers. We want the swing version right now. So I'm going to come down here. So what I'm going to do, and let's do this right down here, I'm going to now construct it. So T1 equals new timer, and the timer constructor takes two parameters. It takes an action listener object and an integer. Remember the order of them here. So we're going to give it AL action listener timer, and I'm going to give it 1,000. And I think I might have this backwards. 1,000 ALT. There we go. So the first parameter for the constructor is an integer. The second one is the action listener you want. And what this essentially does is this tells the timer object to execute every 1,000 milliseconds and run action event associated with ALT. So again, up at the top here you'll see we created this action listener called ALT, and what it tells it to do is to print. And if I come back down here, that means that method is going to execute every 1,000. So if I run this, I should see down in my console print. And let's just string this over. And I don't. The reason why we don't see anything yet is because I have to both construct the action listener, I have to construct the timer object, but I also have to start it. So watch down here now. Print, 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 print. So what I can do now is I can use this to print out some timer on my screen. So let's X this out again. We have a bunch that are still running here, so there we go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here and I'm going to create an integer called time. I'm going to set it to 0. And so every time this timer object fires off, I'm going to do this. Time is equal to time plus 1. So what I get now is I get this idea of watch 1, So this is now the timer object is incrementing this time. So it's just going to run and keep going for us. So I X that out. So this action performed, and sorry, I said down here, action event, action performed is the method that is executed. This action performed is going to just continually run and increment my time. Well, maybe what I want to do is I want to print that on my screen. So I could print that in a number of places. For this situation, what I'm going to do is I'm going to print it in let's print it in our main panel. So if I run this again just to get a look, this is my main panel. I'm going to print the time right here. Okay, it's not going to look fancy, it's just going to kind of appear on the screen. So let's do a little bit of just figuring out what the XY coordinates of that is. So this is 0, 0. I come across, this is 300, 0. And let's remind ourselves, how big is this? Is the window pane. The window pane has 600. So this is 0, 0, 300, 0, 900, 0. So let's make it 910. And let's make the Y about 10. So we're going to come back into here. So I'm going to go g.drawString, and I think we said 910. So the X position of the string is going to be 9. Oh, sorry, the argument's backwards. The first thing is a string. So we're going to print out time colon plus time, and we're going to print this out at 910. And let's do 910.10 and see what it looks like. There it is. There's our time. Now notice, see how the timer is incrementing there, but this isn't changing? Can you guess why that is? Well, remember, in our previous video, the problem was that when I drew this line, remember this button here, when I essentially changed the status of this button, which affected what is displayed as I invoked this repaint method to re-render what's on the screen. So if I come down here to the paint, and I want this to execute. It executes when I first run my program, but it doesn't execute again unless something triggers it. Now there are various automatic triggers, i.e. the window screen size changing, for example, but the timer firing off is not a trigger for that panel to repaint itself. So if I go here, panel.repaint, and again, I always use repaint to invoke the paint method, and I run this, and now I have a timer on my screen. Now I want to make this, let's change this font a little bit. Let's have a little fun here just to kind of wrap up this video. So the first thing I want to do, I'm going to come into my panel paint section, is I'm actually going to change the position of this a little. Where are you? There you are. I'm going to bring you down, say, 50. So first thing I want to do is I want to it looks like a little better spot. Well, a nice thing I can do is I can create a font. So if I go font F equals new font, and I believe to do this is font dot, the first thing you have is your style. So we're going to do, styles are stored as constants, so I can say sans serif. The next one I believe is your, if you want any type of style to it, and the third one I believe is your font size. So let's make you 30. I could have one of these reversed. I have to import the font class. No, I think I got it right. So I'm going to create a font object, and that font object is going to be sans serif. It's going to be bolded, and it's going to be a size of 30. So what that means now is I can use that g.setFont. I can set the font on this panel to whatever I want. And I run this now. A little big. So maybe what I want to do is maybe I'll make it 20. Let's see. And now I have a timer that's a little bit bigger, and I can add some sort of timing element to my game. I hope this video helped. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to post them.